And before you know it, I found myself at this one club taking a hit of ecstasy for the first time in my life. And in that moment, I thought I discovered God in a pill. But that was my moment, the lowest moment of my life. I overdosed because in that moment, in my most desperate moment, I had an encounter with God. And all I heard was everything is going to be okay.
What's up, guys? Steven here. This is Hope on Demand, and thank you for tuning in. Today's episode is one of my favorite episodes so far. Just in editing it after our recording, after our shoot. You know, I'm so excited for this one because number one, Joe really helped me through a lot of craziness when I was a teenager. He was my young adults pastor. I've known him now for better part of 12 years, almost 13 years. He married Becky and I. You're going to love his story. You're going to love what he shares. He talks about how his life really began to fall apart. Grew up in a Christian home, started partying, experienced ecstasy for the first time. You know, just his whole journey, his whole story is one of hope. Tune in today, man. You don't want to miss this episode. Please welcome Joe Mebrahtu.
For years, I had this relationship with God that was based on my head in the sense of I had knowledge of God, but I didn't really understand who God was. I'd gone to Bible school, learned about God. And it was essentially a guy who's out there defending the faith even in universities. I was the staff worker at Carleton University dealing with pro-life issues. And I found myself often trying to convince people and to persuade people and to win people. But in the process, I was losing myself, and somewhere along the way, I just literally and completely lost my faith. I stopped believing in God. And when that happened, what ensued was I began to pursue hedonism. I called it, I started majoring in hedonism one-on-one. And I began to drink, I began to party. And that slowly kept escalating to eventually having to actually leave the city and left everything. Just like the prodigal son, I told my parents I was going to pursue my dreams, and went to Toronto, the big smoke, big city, with a great dream. But unfortunately, I didn't have any faith. I didn't know what to believe in. And so got a job at Rogers Communication, great job. And met some really, I guess what you would consider to be people that were lost just like me. And we began to work and make lots of money. And then in the evenings, we'd go out and partying. At first, it just started, like a typical group of corporate employees going out there and just, shooting the breeze and drinking some beer. But it escalated to going to raves. And then before you know it, I found myself at this one club taking a hit of ecstasy for the first time in my life. And in that moment, I thought I discovered God in a pill. I had never felt so much joy. I felt a tangible presence of all the stuff that I was talking about for years, because I only had a knowledge of God. I'd never had an experience of God. And so I got addicted. I got hooked pretty quickly. And before you know it, I was out every night raving and popping pills, and it began to literally take a hold of my life to the point where I became absolutely addicted, to the point where my employer actually recommended that I go to rehab. And so I ended up actually going through 12 weeks because it was mandated by my employer, but unfortunately that did nothing. The people that were working with me, specifically one of the psychiatrists, he said to me, "Joe, it seems based on what you're telling me is that you've chosen to live this lifestyle. So go ahead, do it. Why do you feel so guilty?" But there was something going on. God was chasing me, but I just didn't know. And so one day, after going through this whole process, I make the decision, of course, to still use and still party. And so one night I'm out partying away and find myself at a casino. The worst thing that you could ever do is gamble high. But here I was gambling high, playing all sorts of games, and I was actually winning. I think I'd made over a few $1,000s, and I kept winning. And I didn't know what was going on, but before you know it, I just kept taking the drugs. And I think by the time the night was done, I had about 8 pills of ecstasies and every other kind of substance you can think of. And suddenly I began to literally convulse. My body started to shake, and the room started to spin. And the guy that I was in with, I started screaming, put me in his car. We began driving. We were pretty far from Toronto. We were probably about an hour away. And he sped, and he dropped me on the steps of Sunnybrook Hospital and left. What a wonderful friend. But that was my moment, the lowest moment of my life. I overdosed, and I still get shivers when I think of this moment, because in that moment, in my most desperate moment, I had an encounter with God. And I don't know if this lady was an angel, I don't know if she was a nurse, but I just know that there was an elderly woman that came to me with a wheelchair. And all I heard was, everything is going to be okay. And I believed her. And that was the beginning of a healing journey. And I remember at the hospital going through withdrawal and going through this whole process of finally realizing what my life had come to, and feeling a sense of shame and guilt. My parents had come from one of the poorest countries in the world to give me a life of opportunity, and I had squandered it. Just like the prodigal son, I found myself at the lowest point of my life. And all I wanted to do was return as a servant into my home. I didn't know if my parents would even want to talk to me, but the doctor kept insisting that I make the phone call. And I was terrified at the idea of what my parents would say. So with tears and shaking and just totally petrified, I call. And my father never, ever answers the phone. But guess what? That day, all I hear is, hello. And I was about to hang up, but I just found the courage to say, Dad, it's me. And it almost makes me cry right now, because it's that moment where I just expected my dad to hang up. But all I heard my dad say to me was, it's okay, we love you, come home. And something broke in me. You know, when you finally experience love in a tangible way, it just changes you. And that was the beginning of transformation. That was the beginning of journey. And from that day forward, God began to bring the right people in my life. And this is why I know Stephen. You know, I ended up connecting with Stephen because I became a pastor, because of an individual that I ended up meeting after this crazy encounter, and then had even a crazier encounter with God. And once God marks you, you're never the same again. And so since that day, and this is back in 1999 when I had overdosed, God has completely and utterly changed my life. I've got 3 amazing, beautiful babies. I've got a wife that I do not deserve. I've got this rich heritage of amazing people and mentors that have poured into my life. And so I'm just blessed to know that God's grace is unfailing. And no matter how bad things get and how screwed up you might be, God is still there. One of my favorite passages in scripture says that God is beside the needy. God is always there. We just sometimes don't notice. And sometimes we think God is not talking, but He is. We're just not listening. And when we're ready, He shows up. And so I just want to encourage anybody that's going through something right now, and you might feel that you're in the most desperate place, and you don't think that there is a way. But this is the lesson I've learned, that God is a God of the impossible. He can totally and completely transform your life.